Hi guys, what is going on, and welcome back to another video on Conqueror's Blade. So today, men-at-arms. Well, this has been a long time coming. It seems to have taken me absolutely ages to get these guys leveled up. Not quite sure why, just sort of struggled with them a little bit at times, and yeah, the motivation hasn't kind of been there. But we've got there now, and I've kind of tried to explore them fairly thoroughly. We've done two separate veterancy lines, kind of played around with them a little bit, and kind of learned a reasonable bit about them. So, first off, let's just talk briefly about the two veterancy lines and kind of which ways I've gone. So, initially, when these guys were first introduced, way back in there, I think it was the Knights and Squires update, and this is way before any of the season stuff started. I sort of had a brief look at them, dabbled in them, got them to like level 10, did a really crappy video on them, forgot all about them, and I started going down this bottom veterancy line, which actually is a fairly logical way to go. Not only do you get a fair increase in defense, with piercing defense, slashing defense increases, a bit of extra health and stuff like that, you get this health regeneration. So for every 250 health every second for 15 seconds. And it does, boost your health up fairly reasonably. It's quite a nice way. It kind of keeps the unit alive. Plus, you're getting a plus 50 defense on each point as well, which is kind of nice. And actually, they do look quite a lot cooler when they're in that mode as well, it must be said. So this is what I finished off initially anyway. I came all the way down here. I had included the block status is maintained while attacking, and I think I had a couple of points left to stick in slashing. I'll throw up the screenshot of the previous veterancy line now, so long as I don't completely forget in editing. Please don't kill me if I do, but hopefully I won't. And then so I've been playing with them, and we'll go and have a look at a game or two with them shortly. And they worked reasonably well. They were quite a tanky unit. Your piercing defense gets well into the 800s. Makes it really quite nice. You can see, you can see what it's going to be. You're getting plus 50 there, if not almost 900. And it makes them really quite a tanky unit. Plus, you've got that self-heal. So it means you can throw them into situations quite aggressively. And they survive fairly well. The downside is that their damage isn't particularly high. They're not super aggressive, and you are missing out on the shield bash of the top tree. So you basically have got the option between the defensive tree down here or the aggressive tree at the top, and then it's kind of deciding which way you want to play it. From what I could figure out on a slight tangent here, because this is going to pass through the shield formation section, is that while they're in shield formation, they seem to do piercing damage. Piercing AP and piercing damage here. I don't quite know why. I guess that's because they're stabbing through their shields. I suppose it kind of makes sense. But that's kind of been my experience, or at least that's my understanding so far. Happy to be corrected. And when they're out of shield formation, they're then doing slashing damage. That's why there's effectively these two values. Kind of gets a bit confusing. In the end, I ended up throwing on slashing doctrines because I think I tend to fight with them more outside of the shield wall formation. But yeah, corrections in the comment if I've got my slashing and piercing muddled up. Also, obviously, running them with the range reduction and the increased block doctrine. Thankfully, finally managed to get one. I seem to really run out of these with the increased block doctrine. And I also just threw on a slashing defense because that tends to be what they are most short on out of the defensive statistics. So, anyway, we'll hop into a battle with those guys shortly. But I then mixed things up a little bit and have now reset the veterancy line and gone down the top. So basically, I can still capture this block status is maintained while attacking. That's kind of an important one because it means when you try and swing at them, they basically block, which is nice to have. You're getting increased damage a little bit, a few little bits and bobs, nothing particularly exciting until you get to the end one, which is the shield bash, which obviously is quite effective, can cause a bit of knockdown, pushes enemies back, causes a stun, is quite useful in combat. Plus, the extra bit of damage you get does make them more effective. And you can still catch the shield formation, thankfully, by spreading over the rest of the veterancy line, which is nice because getting that shield formation is really quite nice. It means they hold in like a locked formation and they're static and they don't run off or do anything stupid like Conqueror. So it's quite nice to get that. So yeah, we'll have a look at these two battles. But first, we'll do the old veterancy line doing the defensive stats and see how we get on with that. So into our first fight, we are on the offensive on, I think it's Conqueror Castle. Quite a hard one, actually. Really hard to take the A point. But as we come in, we've got these unit of Conqueror coming from the opposite direction of the wall. They pull back, but I decide it's really worth pushing. Unfortunately, get hit by a volley of javelins, but I go for it. Thankfully, get the knockdown, and we actually done a real good chunk of damage on that charge. That's one thing I've found about the men-at-arms. Their charge is actually really quite damaging. It's well worth having. This poleaxe is a bit of a pain. Causes quite a bit of stun in the corner, but we quite easily deal with that unit of Conquerors. We get the initial damage, and we get a little bit of support from some of these allied pipe players as well. Of course, I've whacked on my self-heal to try and keep the unit alive. You know, I'm finding it is helpful in terms of providing a little bit of a boost to health. But I mean, it's no substitute for finding a supply point. It gives you a little bit of health, but it is just that. It doesn't provide a really big boost. And I think part of that problem is, even though the unit's tanky, they're not like Imperial Spearguard tanky. And so when you use it on something like an Imperial Spearguard, you know, that's just to top the health up from the little bit of damage they take from range and explosions and sort of things that damage while they're in shield wall formation. Whereas this, you're actually trying to use it to prop the unit up in combat, and I'm not sure it works so well. But anyway, as soon as it comes off cooldown, I'll whack it on again, because quite the unit's quite a bit damaged, so you get a little bit of an idea of how much they heal now over this next 15 seconds. See a few of them creep back out of the red, back into the white, so it is providing healing, but just not huge amounts. So we get down to bottom. I initially think, oh, maybe there's quite a few enemy heroes here who kind of want to have a go. Go for the knockdown. And then I actually decided to go for the charge. I thought we might be able to get a chunk of damage here. We do actually get a chunk of damage, not quite enough to get the kill, but we get pretty close. And we push straight into this unit of enemy domain spearmen. Okay, so I'm thinking, well, we're down the bottom of the stairs now. Nothing immediately too threatening, so let's just deal with these guys. And even though they're on the defensive tech tree here, these men-at-arms, and you can see because of the fact they're elited, they're in this different skin that they're on the bottom tech tree, you can see that they deal with those, you know, domain spears really quite easily. Obviously a fairly low tier unit, so nothing that should be too much of a problem, but they cut through them quite effectively. A couple of enemy heroes here sort of being a little bit of a pain, but we soon start to overwhelm them. We even get a friendly unit of Azaps. We can continue to push through, and yeah. Okay, up to 50 kills already, and we started, you know, so we've had about 40 kills fairly quickly. So then I'm thinking, well, maybe we can push the B point. Unfortunately, a lot of our team just walks into the Fortebraccio unit head-on, and with a lot of pretty much the rest of the team dead, it just didn't seem worth pushing down there. It's just going to be suicide, so I think, okay, let's call that quits, let's pull back up and head back onto the wall. Maybe there's a bit more of a push going on the A point now, maybe we can throw ourselves in on that and get a little bit of extra sort of support going to try and capture the A point. So I'm pushing back along the wall and trying to remember to activate my self-heal every time it comes off cooldown. But ideally I'd like to try and get to a supply point. Then I see this longsword having a little bit of a gander down the siege tower. And this is where it all goes a bit wrong. I think I can sneak up behind him. Unfortunately he turns around and I miss my ultimate. Then I'm pulling back and I'm starting to get pushed by these enemy heroes. They get the knockdown on me and I've got 3 heroes on me. So I go for the charge to try and get one of them. Fortunately, really only clip one of them and not particularly well. So I've now got 3 heroes on me, all with just an absolute ton of stun. And both me and the unit spend the bulk of the time on the ground. Unfortunately, I just get completely overwhelmed. And then that maul turns up with 4 heroes. It's just too much for the unit and me. And unfortunately, the unit basically just gets wiped along with myself. And that spells the end of the game. So on to the second one, and these guys are still on the bottom line. They're still the elite men-at-arms with that sort of much more defensive posture rather than the attacking. And I've just been messing around at the B point before I forgot to turn the recording on. I've had about 30 kills so far with the men-at-arms for no losses. And as we come up, we push up this ladder, and a mixture of pipe militia and serfs. There might even be village watchmen, actually. Hard to tell. No, I think they are pipe militia. And we cut through them, obviously without any issues. But then we come across the back of a unit of Iron Reapers. I was actually really surprised with the damage they get on that charge on the back of those Iron Reapers. I thought that was really decent. Obviously you're critting because you're charging into the rear, but considering those Iron Reapers are fighting, pipe militia and peasants, and they weren't even in brace, we did a real good chunk of damage there, and actually took those Iron Reapers out pretty easily. So the charge is well worth trying to get into the habit of using. Definitely something I sometimes struggle to remember when on sword units. I'm not always brilliant at making use of the charge, so yeah, I was quite pleased with how damaging the charge is on this unit. So then I'm thinking, where to go next? Where am I looking for? I saw on the mini-map there was a few people continuing sort of on there, but going down the back on the A-line. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. I'm looking up, seeing if there's something coming. I'm going to go back to the A-line, but then I see this unit of Conqueror going around the back. Really strange encounter here. I'm not sure if the enemy hero is dead or not. I just engaged them. They basically run at me. But they basically, I'm not sure if they're trying to run through or what, or whether the stun was just really effective, but they basically just get themselves absolutely wrecked. And they, yeah, that's them all dead. They didn't last very long at all. I think their hero was probably dead though, so they were just in free attack mode, so they weren't really being very effective. So now I'm looking about where I want to push on to next. I feel like it's been a decent start. We've had 90 kills with our men-at-arms. killed a mix of units. You know, some of the pipe militia stuff fairly easy. The Iron Reapers was pretty good. That was a nice, 350 leadership unit to take out. A nice tier 5 unit to be able to kill. So throwing myself back on the supply point. Unfortunately, we have now lost the A point. I do notice on the mini-map, there's those little guys walking down towards the C point on that street over. And that's what I'm thinking. Have a quick look on the tactical map, and I do see there's some allied units there. So there may be a little bit of support for us if we can get there in time and lend support. And this is one thing about the men-at-arms I like. They're actually quite quick. Compared to a lot of heavily armoured units, they turn up fast. It makes them much more enjoyable than like the prefecture guards, palace guards. Anyway, as we turn up, we get a unit of spear sergeants going across the street, and thankfully we managed to get a stun and get a charge into a chunk of them. And the men-at-arms do a really good job of just cutting these people to pieces. And yeah, the damage there, really quite nice. Unfortunately, the enemies then turn up with a unit of fortibrachers, and there's nothing I can do basically in that situation. If I advance into that fortibrachers behind a line of shields, I'm just going to die very, very quickly. So it's really not worth me doing. So I'm pulling back. Get out of there, see what I can do, think about what I want to do next. And my general thought is I'm probably going to go down towards base and loop back round. Have a little bit of a look, see if the fortibrachers have moved off by that point. They may have got themselves in a different position, and there may be an opportunity for us to try and flank or get at them from a better angle. Because obviously, as everyone knows, head-on fortibrachers is always a bad idea. Obviously, we have sort of abandoned the B point. Bit of a tough one, I feel, B point on this map. Like, once you've lost A, I feel like B point has really almost gone. It can be a little bit of a suicide mission defending it. So I basically haven't really done a lot to defend that. I'm more worried about the C point. Anyway, so as we come back round here, we see we've got the fortibrachers. I wish I'd been a bit quicker because we could have caught them earlier. Unfortunately, I catch the back through. I activated my ult a little bit too early. And as we come around, we also get this unit of winged hussars which charged. Very strange. Obviously did a charge against another unit on the main street, but then they're sort of just left on attack mode to mill around. Initially I pulled back, but really they're not all that great in hand-to-hand, and we actually get quite a few kills on some of these winged hussars. So it's really nice to again be taking out a really high leadership unit. And even if we don't kill every single one of them, at least half of the unit, that's well worth doing. Then as we pull back round, I was kind of hoping there was still going to be some enemy infantry on the main point, and we were going to get that rear flank and I was going to charge into the back of them and it would have been glorious. But yeah, they were all dead. So I was kind of a bit disappointed, if I was honest. But anyway, I'm thinking, okay, we're doing well. We've still got a chunk of this unit left. It's actually in relatively good health. I'm obviously continually cycling my healing, and we haven't really visited a supply point for a while, so maybe that is testament how that healing just keeps the unit in sort of semi-decent health all the time. Allows it perhaps to keep fighting longer. So I'm looking around, seeing if there's anything to see. I thought that longbow had got infantry with him when those condottieri charged, but he actually didn't. He was just there as a hero on his own. I was a bit of a coward here. In hindsight, maybe I should have pushed forwards and peeled to the right and tried to engage some of that enemy range stuff. Or maybe I should have just charged straight into the point and get stuck in to try and defend it. Instead, I'm thinking, well, let's try and go around the back of that range by coming back, through the gateway and round the back. Maybe I can get a nice charge in. Unfortunately, as we come around here, this enemy Nadachi comes down, and he just has no fear. He just goes straight for it. And then we get this unit of pipe militia, which of course I should have thought. As soon as I charged them, they braced. So I'm basically running straight into a unit of braced pipe militia. And then this Nadachi just outplays me pretty much in every single way. And I just sort of get caught between the sandbags and the pipe militia in this perma-stun from this Nadachi. And I just can't get off the floor. A second Nadachi turns up. I eventually get a little bit of CC control back in hand, but by this point most of my unit's dead and my health is all gone. And then a unit of fortibrachers turns up. And that is game, set and match. Well outplayed by the Nadachi, good job, that player. So that's kind of been my experience with them on the defensive side. Decent damage, but not amazing. Are quite tanky. The heal's nice, but I don't think it's necessarily game-changing. So let's go and have a look at them now on the more offensive side, with the top veterancy line. So it's actually quite early on in the battle on this one on Harbour City. We've pushed up the siege tower and we're immediately thrown into a fight against a unit of men-at-arms. Thankfully, we kind of have the numbers advantage, and I guess we sort of overwhelm these Azaps as well. Only little Rattan Ran shields, a strange unit you don't see very often, and we're immediately getting ourselves into 30 kills, which is really quite a nice start to the battle. As we push on, we clear out the A point and we're immediately getting onto the cap, just clearing out the remainder of these condottieri as my unit catches up. But as we do that, we see another unit of condottieri setting up, and we line ourselves up for the charge and see how many kills we get on this charge here. So on 30 kills, 41, 42, 45, 47. So we've got about 17 kills on that card, and that is our condottieri dead. A lot of that, with a little bit of obviously throwing the glaive around, but the glaive isn't that damaging, not when you compare it to like the maul or something. The men-at-arms charge is what did a lot of that damage. And once they get stuck into hand-to-hand, these guys with the top veterancy line are a lot more damaging. I think that shield bash has a lot to do with it, and they are quite an effective unit. So as they push on, I realised I'm actually going to bleed to death. I didn't know if I was going to make it or not, and it rapidly became apparent I wasn't. A little trick here you can do, once it given the bleed tick, I immediately knocked on my healing, and healing doesn't auto-cancel during bleed damage, it only cancels when you take damage. So that's why if you activate your healing immediately after having received a tick of bleed damage, you can then get 1 or 2 ticks of healing in before it gets auto-cancelled by the resulting bleed. So I was actually able to use that to save my life, because even though I'm now really low health, that little 2 ticks of healing was enough to counteract that bleed for long enough to keep me alive. It's just a little free tip Tuesday. But then the problem is I'm now really low on health, and I've got a long cooldown on my healing. I wasn't sure if I really wanted to head down here or not, but then I thought, sod it, let's just go for it. Throw the unit in, I'll hang back a little bit. Again, good damage on the charge, and the unit just get really stuck in. This shield bash is really quite nice, and the extra damage you get from the top veterancy line is better. Obviously, the downside is the unit is pretty low on health, and if we'd had a self-heal, there's a really good chance the unit would now still be much more alive, and a lot more of the unit would still be in good condition. But we would probably have done less damage overall than we currently have. I'm going to try and get into the shield wall formation of these guys, come around the corner, try and absorb that charge, which it does well, but there's so many friendly heroes here against these iron caps that they get overwhelmed really rather quickly. I don't have the health to deal with the incoming stuff, particularly those javelin Imperial Javelineers, sorry. So I charge the unit in. I actually get a few kills against those Imperial Javelins. Considering we're just at the remains of the unit by this point, that's well worth doing. Unfortunately, the rest of the unit gets itself killed, and that's perhaps one of the drawbacks of not having that self-heal, not having that extra defense. It's kind of the price you pay, and I guess that's really what you've got to weigh up all in all. Are you prepared to reduce your damage for defense, or would you rather have that extra offensive capability at the loss of a little bit of defensive stats? I don't think there's necessarily a definitively right or wrong answer for this. I think it's really one that it depends on your own playstyle and what you really want to achieve with the unit. I think for me, I'm probably going to be leaving them in the offensive mode, because I tend to be quite aggressive with my units anyway, and so long as they help me achieve my goal of pushing the point, I don't really mind if they die. I've normally got a couple of other units with me anyway, so yeah, I'm probably going to leave them on the offensive side because I want to be getting the kills and trying to push points more aggressively. But anyway, hopefully that's given you sort of a semi-decent overview of what these men-at-arms can be like. Quite an interesting unit, 2 interesting viable veterancy lines, certainly fairly tanky even on both. Hard to say whether they realistically are viable compared to ASAPs. I think that's probably going to be where they draw back. I think ASAPs probably are a better unit in most situations, even though there really are specific situations. If you get the dominant charge in with your men-at-arms and get the slam in first and then throw in your hero, you will probably beat ASAPs fairly convincingly. But in most situations, I think ASAPs are probably going to be more useful. But just my thoughts on it so far. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And of course, subscribe to the channel for loads more Conqueror's Blade content.